Welcome back to the Start and Scale podcast. I'm your host, Jack Brandwood, and in this series, we're diving headfirst into the world of tech with the people who are coding the future from the front lines. This is the place where we refactor the way you think about scaling tech teams, debugging their journeys, reviewing their stories, and pushing boundaries to ship better insights. Whether you're a seasoned techie who's seen your fair share of legacy code, an aspiring professional ready to deploy your skills, or just fascinated by the world of technology, this episode will give you unique insights and practical takeaways to add to your backlog.
That first failure can destroy them if they're not careful.
So grab your headphones, commit to this listen, and let's sprint into another episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Andy, thank you for coming on.
Nice one. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you found the building in the end. You did what everybody does. They go to the building next door, which is actually a lot nicer. And then they go, oh my God, I'm in the wrong place. Go round and our building is still nice, but less nice, you know.
Well, I've known the building for years, so I wanted to come inside it. It's fascinating to see. It's a bit of Manchester history.
Yeah, it's wild. I probably very uncultured of me, didn't realise how, what's the word? Famous it was, because we get, I think I told you on the way in, we get like groups of architecture, I don't know, hordes of architecture people who come in and they'll go and view the building and stuff like that. We've literally had them in the office before. They said, they've actually knocked on and said, oh, can we come in and view your office? I was like, yeah, sure. All of a sudden there's like 90 French people in our office. And crazy, right? We had this, we have free fruit in the office. It's not one of our benefits. We just offer free fruit. And there was a guy who was just stood there and sat down, feet up, in the office, just eating all our fruit, just like like chucking grapes in his mouth. It was great. Anyway, I digress.
Nice.
I did mention to you before that I like to start these things with a bit of a deep question, which is, who is Andy Lole?
So I'm a technologist, I suppose, a very product-focused technologist. I love solving problems with digital solutions. I love problem solving generally. My passion outside of work is mountaineering, climbing. I find that if I approach that as a problem solving exercise, I can get through some really quite technical ground. And I take the same kind of approach with work of just trying to work with people, create interesting teams and do good stuff to make our customers' lives better.
Love that. But it's so I speak to a lot of techies, and they all seem to have, because I'd say you are a techie, right? Because that's been your background.
Yeah, it's my background, absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like being outdoors, like being like mountaineering, it seems like a common theme across technical people. Why do you think that is?
I think there's certainly quite a big cohort of us who are into climbing or mountain biking or something like that. I think part of it's fitness, but for me, it's definitely, there's a bit of problem solving to it of how can I climb this line? How can I unlock the sequence to get up this thing? Or on a mountain bike, how do I stay on it and not land on my face going down something quite technical and picking my way through? I definitely did not have this thought at the start, but over years of sort of self-reflection, I think that's what the parallel is for me, at least. Of it. It's problem solving. It's using my head as well as staying fit and active and getting away from the computer sometimes.
Yeah, there must be the contrast between what traditionally engineering roles have been, which is like sat in front of a laptop for a long period of the day, to getting outside in the fresh air. It's like the kind of contrast between the two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. And with mountaineering especially, do you feel, I feel like the accomplishment with mountaineering is so tangible, like you literally climb to the top of the mountain.
It is, but it's also very, very personal, quite internal thing. I think it's not uncommon. The stereotype of us being introverts is also probably fairly valid. I'm fairly out of my comfort zone right now, to be honest.
Good.
And that sort of aspect of this, can I prove to myself that I can do this thing? That's there for me. There is with close friends, there's definitely aspects of competition to it as well, of who can do the bolder problem first, who can unlock the sequence first. But for me, it's definitely about, can I do this? And as I've got older, my desire to do the particularly hard technical stuff has definitely become much more about, can I get myself further away from the road kind of thing, rather than doing harder and harder things that have consequences that I don't really want anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. What do you think? This is going to sound really cheesy. What do you think of failure? Like, what's your view on failure and failiness?
So long as it's not the same mistake repeatedly. I think failure is a very normal part of life. If you're not failing, you're probably not pushing yourself out of your comfort zone or trying to do new things. I think that there's sequential failure, as in, I know this is possible, but I haven't yet worked out how to do it. And there's systemic failure, I suppose, of we've not thought hard enough about the problem, so therefore we were probably always destined to fail. And those ones, I think, in some ways it's good for a team to go through a few of those to actually learn how to be a team. But I think if you see a team that is continually just running at something rather than taking a step back and thinking, how do I approach it, that's maybe a problem. But particularly when you're starting out on something, going through a few cycles of that's not right, that's not right, that's not right, trying a few different cul-de-sacs. It's part of the learning experience, isn't it, I think? But
I like that image of cul-de-sac. We get to the end, go, right, let's turn around, let's go again. Let's find another turn in. Naval Ravikant talks. He talks about the whole, 10,000 hours thing, and he changes it slightly, and he thinks it's more close. It's more like the amount of iterations, really, rather than just 10,000 hours practice. More like it's like iterating continuously. That's what you need to be doing, rather than just like doing the same thing over and over.
Well, I think from just bringing that back to technical delivery, it's iterating in that way is essential. Now, the old school days of a big bang release every quarter kind of thing, if you can pull that to very small iterations and making small changes regularly, the cost of failure is reduced. So that actually, if you're only changing a small piece, if you do get it wrong, you can do something about it much more quickly. So that iterative approach, I think, to my mindset, fits very, very clearly into good product delivery as well.
Do you feel like with people in your team, if they're more junior, are they more afraid of failing at stuff?
Yes and no. I think you've got some folk who may come in pretty confidently. It's like, I've got this, don't you worry. And that first failure can destroy them if they're not careful. But there's definitely folk who are, I'm not sure what to do here, so I'm going to do nothing. And it's what the failure there is not asking for help, I suppose. And how do you create an environment where people are up for asking for help quite early on? And then worst case, you need to wean them off the crutch. Best case, they actually work out how to do it, and now they build relationships with people. And I think it's a key part of getting your senior people to be good is encouraging them to be helpful and responsive to questions rather than nervous and uncomfortable about it themselves of people asking them stuff.
Yeah. I think, honestly, with that, I think there's something so powerful about if you're somebody who is like, welcomes failing at stuff, not like because you're crap at it. It's more like, like if you set yourself a target of like failing at something every single month or every 6 months, whatever it might be. And that's such an awesome thing to do, because if you can do that, you're failing and you're happy about the failure. But also the great thing is you failed, which means that you push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Like you doing this podcast today, right? I mean, you seem super comfortable and super confident, right? But you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. I think everyone should do that, because otherwise you're just kind of sleepwalking through life in a way.
I think there's a bit of it about how do you frame it as well. It's a learning experience, isn't it? Are you learning fast? The old fail fast, fail cheaply line. If you frame that as learn fast, learn cheaply, what you've learned is that way didn't work. What was Edison's quote of, I've found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb kind of thing. That kind of thing. Framing it as a learning experience, iteration, experimentation. We want to do experiments on our user experience. Why wouldn't we want to do experiments on our delivery process? That kind of framing it as it's okay so long as we're not repeating the same mistakes again and again. That's okay.
I realize I keep forgetting to do this. You weren't always the Andy you are now. And part of our vision at Tact is to create a world where everyone gets their dream job. Like, we take that very, very seriously. So I kind of pre-warned you to think about this question, but could you draw for me what you wanted to be when you grew up? Also, how good are you at drawing?
So I'm not going to draw quite the right vehicle, but I will draw the concept.
You are good at drawing. I think I see. Go faster stripe, of course.
That'll do.
Love that. Yeah, brilliant. Oh, mate, nice. So what? Could you tell us what it is?
So that's more of a sort of F1 or track car, but I wanted to be a rally driver as a kid.
Just so you can see. Rally car driver.
The reason for not drawing a rally car is it'll just look like a car.
Oh, it's mint. Is again, race car driving and the technical field seem to again have a theme. Do you think it's all the buttons?
I think the aerodynamics of it, the engineering of it,
Sure.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. When I was at school, I was lucky enough to have access to a really good CDT lab. My brother was really into motorsport, so we got hold of a bunch of like bits of nylon, solid nylon, not a tube, rod, I suppose, and was machining those down to be more solid bushes for the suspension on his car. Because we could, and it's just experimenting with how firm was too firm. This was an old, a proper old Mini. So just doing stuff like that at school was really interesting. So I've never had the desire to really be a mechanic as such, but the science of it's fascinating. But for me, it's just I like to go fast sideways.
Yeah, because again, you tend to find a lot of people who've gone into technical roles. They have a desire to take things apart, learn how it works, and then try and put it back together if they can.
Try and put it back together. How many screws are left over at the end is a sign of success or failure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Do you, when you hire junior people into your team, or when you're hiring people into your team, is that something you look for, or like what do you look for when you're hiring junior people into your team?
Junior people, it's about inquisitiveness. It's about, are they up for it? Do they see work as a challenge or a chore, I suppose? Because particularly if you've got someone who's straight out of college or doing an apprenticeship, straight out of uni, whatever, they probably haven't experienced an actual job. So what are their preconceptions on it?
Yeah.
What excites them? The line around hire for potential rather than existing skill set has to be particularly applicable for people at the start of their career. And I think it's just going to get all the harder at the moment with the sort of proliferation of AI tools and things we see today. There's still going to be plenty of jobs, but I think it's going to reduce the number of jobs that are available for people at the beginning of that. So I heard a pithy quote the other day, AI is not going to take your job. Someone who's better at using AI, it's going to take your opportunity. And I like that. That's a good way of thinking about it. So if people are approaching it in that way of thinking, right, what do I need to do? What am I bringing to the table? That's good.
It seems like a bit of a scary time for getting into engineering at the minute.
I think I can absolutely see why it is. I don't necessarily think it needs to be, and I think something else is going to come along. What's it going to be? I think we will see companies have smaller engineering teams for sure. But I also think that there will be more small companies who need a small number of engineers instead of large companies needing hundreds of thousands. I think there will be still quite a few of those really big ones, but actually the opportunities for small organisations to start up and to be able to afford to have one or two devs, one product manager who actually can do a bit of, I'm not a great fan of the term, but sort of the vibe coding kind of thing of prototyping that and then working with developers to build up on that. I think it unlocks potential for more people to be involved in product delivery and also smaller organisations to punch above today's weight class. So I think, yes, it's definitely going to be challenging, but it's another iteration. It's not that long ago that we had pools of like typing pools and things. Now that job has completely disappeared. But but we did find roles for those people elsewhere in the organisation. I think I'd rather look at that metaphor than the sort of the mining industry metaphor of a thing went away and we didn't help people do something. I think we need to help people find the next iteration for themselves. But I do think if people are up for using AI, it can unlock all kinds of things for them too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's such a good way to put it. And that kind of like democratization of I feel like tech's being more and more democratized now. Like it's so much more easily accessible by just people who are perhaps founders but aren't technical, where they would traditionally have to go and find a co-founder who's technical.
Yeah.
That's less so an issue now.
Absolutely. And I think the flip side of it is that some of the best engineers I've ever worked with are quite commercial. And actually, if what this means is to succeed in the product industry, you need to understand the problem a bit better. That's probably good for everyone.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Do you think, so if you were an engineer now and you're like, right, I need to get ahead of this, I need to become more commercial, what would you do? And that's a really big question, but
even things like understanding a finance statement, like profit and loss statement, why it matters. When people talk about EBITDA, what is that? Earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. There's a bunch of big scary words in there. What does it actually mean? Why do people care about it? That whole thing of, we all communicate in a what's in it for me kind of way. So being able to understand what the person sitting on the other side of the table actually wants you to say, not what you think they want to hear, but what is the answer they're actually looking for. So spending, if you're doing a computer science degree, do a business module. If you're doing a product degree, do more of the marketing stuff, or actually think about customer service. You know, some of the best product teams I've ever been lucky to be in, customer service has been part of the team, and just does bring quite often brutal honesty, but also just a reminder of why it is we're doing stuff. So just thinking more broadly than just your own skill set, I suppose, is one. So a long-winded way of saying.
No, that's a very valuable way of looking at it. And it's just interesting. It's an interesting time to be alive. You know, historically, I was alive, obviously, through the invention of the iPhone and, you know, whatever. But very rarely are you in a situation where you're like, oh my God, this is a moment that is going to change the world. And I'm in it now, and I'm recognizing that this is changing the world. It's kind of weird being in the moment and being aware of it. It's kind of strange.
Yeah. The internet was a thing before I went to uni, but I just sort of took it for granted.
Yeah.
I wasn't really aware of how fundamental it was as it happened. The iPhone happened, and that was like, yeah, this is changing stuff. I'd been hoping for something like that for ages because I don't like carrying around laptops and phones and all the rest of it. It's just one thing in my pocket would be great.
Yeah.
But AI is definitely one of those moments of it's unlocking so much for so many people.
Yeah.
And I absolutely get why people are scared of it, but I think it's an opportunity for all of us if we just lean into it, learn how to ask good questions. You know, there's people say that it will stop critical thinking because you can get really detailed answers there and then. I actually think there's an opportunity that will improve critical thinking because you need to work out, is what it's just told me a really, really well put together hallucination?
Yeah. There's a lot of the time, if you get an answer from ChatGPT and then ask it for its sources, it kind of like starts to fumble, bit scared, like, you know.
Exactly that. And being able to your point around what you look for in people at the start of their career, a few years back, the best answer to how do you do something hard would not necessarily be, oh yes, I know this off the top of my head. It's, I'm not sure, but I can use Google and Stack Overflow. Now it's, I can use those things. I can use ChatGPT. I'm confident enough to ask someone. You know, that to me is a great answer. It's not necessarily can you write a compiler from memory. It's like, I don't need to. I've got tools for that. And here are the tools that would help me if I actually needed to for some reason.
Yes, yeah. I guess the only concern when it comes to software engineering is it that people might not understand truly how something works at the bare bones of it. Yeah.
And that's the bit where I think the critical thinking comes in of, we are now, there's so many libraries and things that are abstraction layers on top of stuff that somebody still needs to be thinking about okay, what's our throughput per second here? How do we get the performance we actually need from a customer experience perspective? How quickly should that be running? And therefore, when we are fairly successful with this iteration of the product, how big could it get? And therefore, these compromises we made here might bite us later on. You know?
Would you, if you started your career again, would you go into software engineering, or would you do something different?
There's a lot of things that I've found interesting having had exposure to, but I think me as the 23-year-old that left university, I was definitely quite introverted, and I was definitely better interacting with a computer, I suppose, necessarily than people. So I think probably would hope that I would have ended up, I did electrical engineering, so hopefully I would have taken this sort of the coding side of things a bit more seriously and actually had a bit of motivation. But I'm very, very happy with where I've ended up. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and everyone's always curious if you started the game again and went a different way, what would happen, obviously. But it's like, what's that? Is it Bandersnatch? Is that the famous game where you can pick different?
Yeah.
It'd always be
Black
interesting.
Mirror thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would like to have done sooner would be that point it was making around sort of understanding and empathizing with people outside of my sort of engineering or product space. I'd love to have done that sooner and been able to have a bit more influence even earlier in my career. That would have been great.
That's a good piece of advice, really is. Okay, awesome. And just talking about your background, how did you get from uni to where you are now?
Very good question. I did electrical and electronic engineering. The only thing I knew at the end of that was I didn't want to work in a power station and I didn't want to design chips.
Right.
So I was lucky enough to work with Motorola through the second half of my degree. So I did work in a chip fab up in what was called Silicon Glen at the time, the area between Edinburgh and Glasgow.
All right.
And much as it's critical and it's unlocked everything we've got around us, it did not float my boat. I'd done a little bit of coding in my degree, and so did a consulting grad scheme and ended up doing a lot of coding through that. 4 years of mainly public sector, mainly travel projects, and that was great, really interesting. Learned a lot, but as a taxpayer, I was pretty frustrated about how the projects were run. So I've already mentioned mountaineering is my passion. Opportunity came up. The British Antarctic Survey were recruiting field guides, which basically logistics, but in a pretty harsh mountainous environment. Applied for that on the off chance. I'd had a couple of friends who'd done it previously, and it looked awesome. Was very lucky, very privileged to get the job. So I went to Antarctic for 18 months and did that. Did a fair bit of mountaineering around the base we were at, but a lot of research, quite a bit of climate research that was happening. This was mid-2000s, so it was still already mature climate research, but still quite a lot to discover around, climate change is a real thing in my opinion, based on what I saw through that.
Wow.
So that complete distraction, but scratch that itch of actually, do I want to be in the mountains full time? Which I learned from that was, no, I don't. I do quite enjoy it makes the mountains all the better by not being there all the time, I think. So back in the UK, bumped into an old colleague who was having a beer with a friend who had an idea for a real estate portal. This was, Google Maps had just come out. No one had put map search together properly yet. So just launched into that. Things went well until 2008 happened and there were no houses for sale anymore. So we folded that, and I got a job somewhere else as a software developer. Did not having grown and shrunk a team and at least I didn't know the term CTO at the time. It was effectively CTO as a technical co-founder. Did not want all of that kind of stress. Just wanted to be sat in the corner with my headphones on again, and was team leading again within 6 months, and worked up again from there. So.
Whoa. So that's a pretty, especially within tech, like, because they say within tech, sometimes if you take enough time out, it can be really scary because it's changing so quickly, and you need to. It's like having consistent homework, right? You know, if you're doing software engineering because it's just a job, then no one is crap because you have to be consistently researching and going to events and whatever. So you to take 18 months out to follow that passion, which is commendable. Right? That's awesome. That must have been a scary thing to try and do.
I was young and maybe a bit arrogant. It's
Cool.
like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
When I was quitting the job, didn't even occur to me that this might be closing a door, to be honest. And that's maybe naive. That's maybe me. I'm a far more reflective person now than I was back then. But it's like, no, I want to do this thing. So I'm gonna see if I can do it. I got the opportunity, so I did it. I learned from that it wasn't the thing. I think part of what I love about our industry is it's super fast paced, and you do have to keep up to date. So the challenge of, okay, how do you create something like Rightmove from scratch? Don't know. Let's try.
That's wild.
That sort of naive optimism, I think, is actually essential, because if you actually focus on how hard stuff is going to be, how many fans have you heard say, if I knew what it was going to be like, I probably wouldn't have done it. You know, I think big engineering change can be a bit like that. So you've got to keep a bit of naivety to it, I think.
So what was the journey at the business after Antarctica, at the Antarctica?
So we started off, we called ourselves Right Location. Rightmove's lawyers had an opinion about that.
Really? So
we ended up being called Hacienda, which as a Manchester startup, there was all kinds of history to that, which was quite cool as well. We built a platform. I learned a lot about what needs to be involved in scaling it and operating it, not just writing the code, but actually being part of the ops team, or being the ops team. The piece around actually going out and talking to customers. What is it that the estate agents needed? What did our end users need? Things that we had school catchment areas marked on the map in the mid-noughties, which is still something that's not necessarily super common at the moment. It's also probably irrelevant these days because the catchment areas seem to be nonsense. But at the time, there was data sets out there. So finding that data and turning it into something you could put on the map, that was both an interesting technical problem, but to solve a really good user need. Didn't learn a great deal about running the business. That my partner Paul was doing most of that. He was doing a lot of the sales, but actually helping convert estate agents, going out and talking to them and getting the data feeds from them, making sure that they felt that we actually added some value. We were doing a great job of signing up new agencies and things, but the financial crisis put paid to it. We scaled up, we scaled back down again. Met some great people through that, and then probably a very useful skill of how to manage the 17 credit cards that I'd got to put my bit of the money into it, and getting the spreadsheet right for moving stuff around. It's all very money saving expert skills, useful for life.
Yeah, Mark Lewis would be very proud. But out of interest, what, other than financial management, what did you learn during that period?
I think wearing lots of hats was useful, because actually DevOps as a concept probably was evolving around that time. But again, I hadn't been exposed to it. We were a small team, but being 1 foot in each camp of, I need to make this change quickly, but if I don't do it well enough, the website won't work, and that'll be a problem for me in a different way. You know, when I moved on to an organisation called Late Rooms, who back in the day was a real Manchester success story, and it's still in the early days of that scaling up. And when we started talking about DevOps, of actually, rather than having objectives for the engineering team about how much change you can make, and objectives for the ops team about how stable is the platform, and i.e. therefore how little change have we made, because changing things is normally what breaks it. You know, you've got to, the analogy I use there is we talk about like the one North Star metric, but actually you need an X and a Y axis. If you're only looking at things in one direction, you may have a negative impact on something else. So how to get to the North Star, what matters on X and Y. And that I think is just having a bit of empathy for other teams, and therefore why a good product team is cross-functional, not in a pure engineering sense of you've got development and ops and data, but actually you've got marketing, you've got sales, you've got customer service. It's properly cross-functional across the whole business. And taking that thought through to, okay, so when I'm in a leadership team, I might lead product and engineering, but I'm part of a cross-functional exec team. So if I'm not actually speaking to my colleagues in the exec quite often and sparring with them on stuff, am I doing my job right? And if I expect my cross-functional teams to be doing it, why shouldn't I be doing that within a leadership team I'm part of?
And yeah, I know that's okay. That's really interesting. And I've heard so much about late rooms, by the way. Everyone looks at late rooms, or if you've got late rooms on your LinkedIn or CV, they're like, okay, they're good. They're a good engineer, you know.
The folk that I was privileged to work with, where they've gone on to CIO of Rolls-Royce, engineering director at Klarna, big roles in Booking.com, big roles in eBay.
Wow.
You know, it's Manchester. Manchester in the late noughties, early 2010s was, we still were, clearly many would say we're still secondary to London, but we were definitely secondary to London. You know? But the BBC coming up, at the time we thought that was maybe a scary thing, but actually unlocked some stuff. And booking via the rental cars acquisition. Now Manchester's amazing, but at the time I think we were maybe not bleeding edge, but we were certainly leading the charge there, and it was an awesome place to be.
You mentioned that about sparring with some of your colleagues. I assume you're talking verbally rather than physically, but why is that important? Because I feel like, and to give context, I feel like engineering is one of the only industries where verbal kind of like, what's the word? Asking why, or, you know, that thinking about like, but why that, but why is very common. Like if you did it in any other industry, they'd be like, shut up and just stop questioning why I'm doing it, you know. Why do you think that is?
How many conversations have you heard people talking about of, yeah, they built something, but it wasn't what I asked for? You know, that's pretty common. And the pedantic answer on the other side was, I built exactly what you asked for. And that's because we've got two conversations going past each other. So you've got to do it in a way that is constructive and collaborative. But just the 7 Whys thing, I can't remember who wrote that, but really good way of trying to get to what is the actual problem you're trying to solve is asking more questions. And to your point, you absolutely need to do it in a way that the stakeholder doesn't feel like you're just being obstructive or saying you don't want to do it. But equally, if you take the JFDI of just effing do it, you know, you're highly unlikely to get the right outcome first time as well. So does it guarantee you get to the right outcome first time? No, it doesn't. But does it guarantee you've thought a bit harder about it and therefore are aware of if you can understand the value of the potential product, that will help steer the technical approach and the architecture and why do we think about it. Is quick and dirty good enough, or actually is this likely to be the backbone of something where this needs to be fully test driven all the way through? Are we clear that this is doing one thing and one thing only, or actually might this unlock something else? So therefore taking more of a, I don't know, for example, a microservice approach so that it's smaller components and I can change those components more quickly. Because the understanding those things hopefully gets a better product quicker. There's all kinds of things we could talk about there, but it's everything at the end of the day is a people problem of some sort. So it's communication, and I think there is also a bit of, if you're not a great communicator, why is a question you can ask and hopefully get a good answer out of it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah. And it all comes down to like validating, especially when people are setting up a business. The first thing everyone says, it continuously comes up, is validate your idea first. You know, like you said, is it actually something someone wants? Has it already been done? Is it already commoditized? Like, validate it cheaply, learn cheaply.
Yeah, exactly. You know, your point around people at the start of their career, one thing that I think if you can learn to know when you are making an assumption. Now, so many of us can sort of quite confidently express our opinions as fact, but those opinions, there's some assumptions in there, and have we validated the assumptions? And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to.
Yeah.
You can't spend all day validating everything down to the nth degree. You do have to make some assumptions, but document them and come back to them and say, is this assumption still valid? Now, don't stick with it just because you said it so confidently in the past that you don't want to be seen to be changing your mind.
Yeah.
With new information, you should review your previous decisions.
Yeah, you must have crossed paths with people like that in the past where they're so confident and bullshit about something. They say something and go, well, it must be true, you know.
And for some of those people, it is because 9 times out of 10 they're right. And
sure.
some of those people, it's because, but they are still not right every time, and that they need to be aware of that. Some of those people, it's because they're not great communicators, so they make their point as assertively as they can because they're uncomfortable about the conversation. They want to close it down. And so you as the audience, can you listen to that and think, what am I hearing here? If I don't agree with it, when I was younger, I was definitely, I don't agree with that. And now it's more, can you tell me more about that? Because I'm not sure I'm following. So I'm not caught up with you yet. Can you tell me more about how you've got to that? And analogy I quite often use with folk who aren't great on that kind of thing is going back to when I was doing my GCSEs, you got points for showing the working out. Even if the answer was wrong, if you showed where you'd gone wrong, you could still get points up until the point when you made the wrong assumption, the wrong decision. And so if you can take people through how you've got to where you've got to, one, it brings them on the journey with you, and two, hopefully they can say, okay, so let's talk about this bit because I'm not sure if I'm with you there. And even just thinking about things like the language of, I'm not sure if I'm with you versus I disagree. You know, and we're all busy, we don't have time. So finding the time to do that can be difficult. But I do think it's that assertive communication is quite often the case if someone's uncomfortable. So they're trying to close down a situation they don't want to be in.
Yeah. Well, that is, honestly, if people starting out their careers, I think that's such a massive piece of advice you've just given there. I think it's so valuable. If you, like you said, if you knew that earlier in your career, that assertiveness doesn't mean correctness. You know, and if someone's been assertive or perhaps a little like, you know, angry, that's usually because there's something deeper there that you need to dig down on. You mentioned there assertiveness. Just talking about leadership, you've worked at some, you know, startup businesses. You started businesses. You've been in the Antarctica. I get them mixed up. I'm sorry.
So either works. Yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay, great. You know, but then you've been at massive businesses like the likes of eBay, you know, and all that sort of stuff. How has your leadership style changed over the years?
As a team leader, I definitely felt my job was to protect my team, and I want it to be an umbrella, not a funnel. And I think where that's evolved to is that I need to be a sieve. Some of it needs to reach the team. If there's pressure and there's frustration outside of it, my job as a leader is not to be to create a perfect cocoon, because actually, how on earth do they talk to the stakeholders and understand what's going on? So there's a lot about my team as part of the team. My job is to protect them and isolate them from everything. It's actually to encourage them to talk to others and build their own relationships. And my job is to make sure that the vision is clear and where we're going is clear. And when there is pressure, why is that? What's the bit the team needs to hear? The current organisation are working with UK holiday business. It's quite often rainy in the UK. That has an impact on people, whether or not people want to stay in UK holidays. We're not looking for excuses there, but understanding what is going on and being able to provide another data point to the team of, here are things to think about. And therefore, how do we make our product better? So how do we ensure that the property imagery we have on the site is as bright and as sunny as possible? Why does the image editing matter? Because actually, if someone's looking at a property on a rainy day, we still want it to look inspiring for them. Now that kind of stuff is is important. So helping the team understand what's going on. I think the other bit is just being comfortable that you have to talk in ambiguity sometimes. As a team lead, you want to be as open and candid with the team as you possibly can, and that doesn't change as you become more senior. But you will be privy to information that you can't share.
Sure.
And getting comfortable yourself, particularly for people who are looking at things, are thinking, I'm being dishonest if I don't tell the whole story. And that's what I talk about, sort of candor rather than honesty. Be as open as you can and don't lie. But there are things where you're going to have to keep information to yourself for a period of time, deciding when is the right time to be steering people based on extra information you've got. And I get that comes back to what we were talking about a moment ago of asking more questions. Particularly where you can't share everything. How do you ask questions to steer people rather than mandating or directing?
Yeah, awesome. And going on from leadership, I think a massive part of your career has been coming in, solving problems, making impact quickly, basically. How do you when you're coming into a new organization, how do you make an impact quickly without affecting the other stuff that's going on? Because that must be a massive part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's spending the time, even before you start, if you can, to get to know people. Certainly just the sort of the old interview thing of, as I say, with the team I'm joining is the exec team. The team I'm leading is product or engineering or data or whatever. So the people that I need to be able to influence and work with are the other people in the team I'm joining. So chief marketing officer, chief finance officer, what problems have they got? Now, if I could fix one thing for you, if I could change one thing for you, what would it be? You ask your 5 or 6 peers that. If there's a bit of commonality in there, there's somewhere to start. Interviewing the people that are going to be your line reports and getting a sense of how comfortable are they. They're going to be nervous that there's a new leader there. Why are they nervous? Is it because they aren't comfortable about the situation? Is it because they applied for the job and didn't get it? What's trying to understand their motivation as quickly as possible so that you can actually find a few priorities quickly. And then validating are those priorities, are those things that you think are a priority actually a priority? Because it's going to be very easy to come in and think, oh, I've got this, I've seen this before, here's 10 things I can do. You can't do 10 things. So what's the 2 or 3 things that you're going to focus on? Talk to your boss, chief exec, the CTO, whoever it is. Say, look, here's what I've found. Here's what I think I need to prioritize, and therefore here's what I'm not doing. What's your view on that? Give me your feedback on is this going to move stuff in the right direction?
But they're communicating to someone like perhaps CEO. If they're not technical, there's another issue, right? If they're not technical, it could be quite hard to translate that. How do you navigate
so
that?
the challenge is often not the technical bit itself. It's probably delivery. Like, are we fast enough? Are we doing the right things? Is it behavioural, as in we keep having outages and no one's grabbing hold of it? The code itself is absolutely critical, but you're probably not actually talking about coding problems, even if it is a technical change. Another example, with an organisation that had scaled massively through mergers and acquisitions and had 7 different core systems of record. That makes it really difficult to stitch everything together, to see what's actually going on. It makes it difficult to change, because do you change it across all 7 systems, etc. The solution is a technical one. You get it into one reservation stack. But can you frame that in a commercial challenge of the reason we're slow is we're doing it 7 times. And if you think about one change, 1 times 1 is 1. If you've got 2 systems, 2 times 2 is 4. So it's no wonder it's taking us longer, because that's 4 times as big. So 7 times 7, top of my head, I can't think what is that, 49?
God, you're asking me.
49, I think. Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
So I found myself talking in analogies sometimes. I'm not necessarily great at them, but trying to explain stuff in a non-technical way is a key part of a technical leadership role or a product leadership role, I think. You are spot on. Your audience isn't technical, and my job is to communicate to them that I expect them to listen to me and ask questions, but my job is not to bamboozle them with tech.
Yes, and that issue you phrased there, that's quite a common issue where it's, a company's grown by mergers and acquisitions. They've got a lot of systems they need to consolidate and bring in. What you've done this before, or you're doing it now?
Both.
Both. Yeah. What's the best way to go about it?
I think it's be quite intentional about it, because we talk about tech debt. Again, sticking with analogies, the companies use debt all the time. There is nothing wrong with a debt plan so long as there's a repayment plan associated with it. I think the problem is when you get into debt unintentionally without even being aware of it. And that's where that point around validating your assumptions and things, I think, is incredibly important. Have we just made a decision that actually is going to cause us problems in the future? That's fine. It's the right thing to do today, but we need to understand that at some point we need to circle back and rewrite the code in a better way, or get a long-term solution that solves all of these use cases rather than just solving this one thing we need to do today. So things like M&A, quite often, my experience of that is that you have a successful business, quite often they'll get private equity backing, for example, and what comes out of that is the PE playbook is quite often acquire and stitch things together.
Sure.
You're not necessarily thinking about that at the first iteration. You've got a platform that solves your problem. Thinking about not in the early days, not when you haven't done the sort of 0 to 1 bit, but at the point when you're trying to do 1 to 10, think about extensibility. So if I was to try and bolt something else onto this, where are the attachment points? How do I, what is the right place that I would put something? Where do I see the weaknesses in the stack I've got today? Modern architectural practices of much smaller components that are more interchangeable or swappable, that makes life easier for sure, versus the sort of the old school monolithic approach where changing this thing right in the heart's pretty complicated. But if you've not started in that way, how do you apply a wrapper to that, or start to iterate on the code in such a way that it is smaller components, so that when you acquire something that looks very like you and operationally and commercially appears to be identical, but actually they've got this product feature that you really want, but it's so tightly coupled into the core of the system that you can't attach it to your one. Just doing that kind of thought exercise is quite useful early on. And I don't say that to be a distraction of the what's the phrase? Yagni, you ain't going to need it. We can absolutely gild the lily when we're designing software systems, but thinking about it on an architectural level, as of we're successful, we're going to smash ourselves together with someone else. How might we approach that? And keeping that kind of mindset in place with validating architectural decisions, I think, can be quite interesting. I think the other one that is pretty important there is being very clear on what is your strategy as a business to doing it. Are you building a portfolio of businesses that are going to operate independently of each other, or are you trying to build something federated where, no, we have a central system and we need to be really good at, we've acquired this business, we're going to suck all of their data out of their systems into ours, and therefore we need a team that's building that Hoover to suck the data from one place to another. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that must be such a difficult thing if you're a new business who's just starting, because again, a business at that point, I assume probably has been around for quite some time, say 10 years, whatever it might be. They may hate to admit this, but they probably accidentally got to the point where they are now. You never start.
There's a hell of a lot of luck in it.
Yeah. So it's hard to think about those things at the beginning, isn't it?
I don't think you need to think about them too hard. I think the thing to think about at the beginning is, the one thing I can guarantee is I'm going to need to change this at some point. So how do I leave as many doors, changeable doors open as possible? There's a Jeff Bezos line of, one-way and two-way decisions, one-way doors. I can only go through this. I can't come back again. A two-way door, you can go through and go back. At the point when you're thinking about the assumptions you've made, you're thinking about the decisions you've made, is this a one-way or a two-way decision? If it's a two-way one, okay, just crack on with it. And it's not too expensive if I needed to redo it. If it's a one-way door, think a little bit harder about it. If I need to change this bit, this secret sauce, this pricing engine, this AI model, this is going to become, I believe this is going to be the heart of my product in the future. How do I make change easy on that? That matters. This email sending platform that's API driven, so long as there's an API integration, I can swap that out for something else. Cool. Get going fast. And that I think is the thing to keep in mind early on, because having an integration problem due to M&A is a sign of success.
Oh, yeah.
It's great. That is a good problem to have, because you've got big enough that you've bought someone else. Well done.
Yeah.
Before that, though, you are going to have to change and change and change and change. So an M&A integration is, you could frame it as another change. So if you get good at thinking about how to change the product, hopefully it's just another change problem rather than,
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about technical debt, and that seems to be something found, especially if not technical, it's a really scary thing to think about or hear. You mentioned that it's natural. I think that's a really good message to get out there. But then, how do you manage that after the fact? Like, how do you manage technical debt moving forward?
Well, technical debt is a very close to what we're talking about here. Of I want to change something, and it's hard to do so because of some historic decisions. So you will always have it. So it's how do you embrace change? How do you think about change? If you've got a big legacy stack, or you're using a technology that's been deprecated, it's quite easy to look at that and think, oh, we need to rewrite it. Ideally not. Ideally, there will be a way around that. And even if it's taking there's things like, there are various architectural patterns you can take. Things like the strangler pattern, which is to wrap some legacy code in a new layer that means that you can, for example, have an API interface on something that maybe didn't have or had more complexity to it. And then once you've got that new interface that systems can talk to, you can start to change behind that interface. You can start to change small pieces of it, so you don't have to change the whole thing. That kind of concept of knowing some of those sort of enterprise architecture patterns rather than software architecture patterns that can be useful. And there is also going to be a lot of emotion in there, particularly if you've got a team who've worked on a system for a while. If you're saying it's not fit for purpose anymore, you're telling them their baby's ugly. People don't like that. They don't like giving up on something they've just put 10 years of effort into, for example. So explaining to them why we need to change, why we need to do something differently is a big part of it. So the communication of it and the establishing it, so that actually the person or people, because it's often the case, if you've got a legacy system, there's probably one person who is the champion of that thing, and they're the only person that knows the right place to kick it, etc. How do you make them an advocate for change, or at least at a minimum not a brick wall to change? So it's that's a bit of a waffly answer. It's really hard. Managing technical debt is really hard, and it's something you need to be intentional about. We've few places I've been, we've taken a sort of try and do an architecture map and color code where we see the risk. So the green bits, hopefully over time more and more of it goes green, but the red bits are the bits that you want to be thinking about of, okay, we've how many projects or product change or things we want to do are going to be touching these 3 red areas. Maybe we need to start thinking about that sooner rather than later. But I also need to be able to communicate that to my peers commercially of why we need to change this thing. I know you've just asked for, a new discount tool over here, but because it touches the core pricing engine, I'm going to have to do some work over here. And it looks like I'm just putting a line through and putting a different number, but underneath it all, there is something over here that if we get that right, it actually unlocks these 2 other ideas you've had as well, and will make them cheaper. So it will take us longer for the first one, but extending that to do X and Y and Z then becomes a lot easier afterwards. So to your point earlier on, we expect people to explain why they want to do something to us. We as a product function need to be able to explain why and what's the commercial value of doing something just as well.
I know the whole remote versus versus on-site argument has been taught to death. But you've got a distributed team currently, right? It's all over the country, really. How do you find managing that?
So it's not as good as having us all in the same place.
Fair enough.
It just isn't a workshop where everyone's in the room. You've got Post-it notes on the wall, all of these sort of things. Yes, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but majority of cases they are more productive. However, we're not all together, so there are great tools. There are things like Miro where you can try and replicate that, but you have to be really intentional about it. And I think actually being forced to remember that I've just had a conversation with someone, I need to put that into the right Slack channel, I need to put that into the right document, I need to put that into the right place so that everyone's aware of the decision we've just come to. That intentional communication, I think actually being remote has made better and stronger, because if you can just have a conversation with someone in the corridor, you make a decision and then you'll sit back down and you'll tell a couple of people and it'll sort of spread a bit by osmosis that way. Whereas if you have to remember to say, we've made a decision and communicate that, and therefore think about how you want to communicate it, I think so far I feel that actually leads to better outcomes, because you've then got a decision log that you can look back and say, 18 months ago we did this, I can't remember why. Actually it's there because you've got the chat where you've said, Jane and I have just had a chat in the corridor, we agreed X, write it down kind of thing, or the metaphorical corridor in a Slack conversation or whatever. So that kind of intentional stuff. And I think intentionally getting people together, whether that be online or remotely, spending the time on having people who are good at facilitating group discussions so that an online meeting is as good as possible and people behave, and dare I say, even calling people out for when it's abundantly clear that they're writing emails because their eyes are all over the place. They're not engaged in the meeting.
Oh, I hate that. It's the worst, isn't it?
But it's totally natural. It's very, very easy to do, and we as individuals have to do that. But I think the flip side of that is be honest. Are you contributing to this meeting? Why are you in the meeting? Because the benefit of chatting to someone in the corridor is it takes 2 minutes and then it's done, versus putting 10 minutes, half an hour in someone's diary and ending up using all of it. So it's very easy to burn time on calls. So do encourage everyone to be like, what are you getting out of this? Will reading the minutes of the meeting, the notes that are actually taken, the decisions that are recorded in there, will that be enough for you? And it's easy to say all of that, but we do just drift into 2 organisations I've been in. We've taken the Outlook approach of having 25-minute and 50-minute meetings rather than 30-minute and an hour meetings. And what happens there is someone sees you've got 10 minutes in your diary and grabs it. So we've all got to be good at saying how do we want to behave, and reminding ourselves of that. And again, it's easy to say, but it's very, very difficult to do it. But intentional, I suppose, is probably the main one to say, what are the things you want to achieve, and intentionally do that. And we as leaders have to model it, because as soon as any of us starting to be on Slack or doing emails in the back of a meeting, others will take that as an acknowledgement that, okay, it's fine to do it because Andy's doing it.
Sure. Yeah, leading by example. It's very simple, but the one thing that seems to not always happen, it's like with people talk about having an organization that's like emotionally safe, and where they can express ideas and that sort of thing. And the boss will say, "Why is no one telling me their ideas?" and that sort of thing. And but you look at it and you go, "Well, last time someone did that, you kind of shot them down. You weren't leading by example in that field."
Yeah, and that to me absolutely comes back to what I was saying earlier on of as a leader, you can't say your immediate thought
Yeah.
because quite often it might be a bit rude. But it's if you're not following or you're not understanding or you think they're barking up the wrong tree, ask questions rather than stating your opinion. I'm not a particularly confident communicator, so learning that for me was really useful, and I think that is incredibly important because people are scared is maybe the wrong word, but people will defer to someone more senior to them in the meeting. So if that person is engaging and open and encouraging people to say the stupid question that's in their head, because it's probably not stupid if you're thinking it. If you don't know the answer to it, how can you get the right outcome? Because if you don't know the answer to that bit, what else do you not know the answer to, kind of thing. So if you like creating a safe enough environment where people will ask questions, that's a key part of leadership, I think.
Setting the temperature. Love that. Yeah, and you know what? That is so. It's such a simple thing you said, but it's so true. Is don't state your opinion. Ask questions. Like as standard as a leader, that must be the hardest thing to do, especially if you're having a bad day and you're really busy.
You've got 5 minutes till the next meeting, and you haven't done the prep for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So you want to wrap this one up, but I've both observed and I know I have done to others, shut them down unintentionally because I'm in a rush. I've said something that has made them clam up rather than saying, well, actually, we're probably not finished, so can we get another 10 minutes later? And that's completely unintentional. No disrespect intended, but the person on the other end of that, I've seen that, I've experienced that, and I know I've done it to other people. So it's, if nothing else, is just reassuring people, look, I'm in a rush, sorry. If I appear curt on this one, it's because the next meeting is all about signing off an investment case for blah, blah, blah. So if we can't get it done now, let's get together again. Actually telling people what you've got going on.
Love that. Yeah, that's also a great piece of advice. Yeah, and giving them context as to why you're so in a rush. Like, yeah, I'm only human. I've got other things.
Yeah.
That's great. For anyone listening who is about to scale a tech team or, taking a big transformation or anything like that, have you got any words of wisdom for them that you share?
I think it can be incredibly easy to get excited about getting into the doing.
Sure.
And if I'm doing something, then that's good. Whereas actually spending the time up front, we've proven that product discovery is a good idea. I think technical discovery is an equally good idea. And therefore commercial discovery of just thinking why, spending that time going through the why questions so that you are as clear as possible about what the outcomes are and how you're going to measure that, and therefore how you're communicating with stakeholders about are you making progress or not. Because to your point earlier on around exec teams, I think, are becoming more and more technically capable and understanding it, but it's not uncommon that your product or tech person is the most technical person in the room. If you can explain that against the commercial outcome rather than the technical outcome, it's easier for them to understand what's going on and hopefully easier to understand where the risks are. So getting that time up front to think about why you want to, what you're trying to achieve, how you're going to measure it, and then circling back and validating that. And it's easy to say because we've all got a bias to action of, we know what to do here. It's great. We'll just get going with it. And then you find you've walked through 2 of those one-way doors. And it's very difficult to unpick what you've just done. And if you're right at the beginning of the program to say, we need to start again, that's actually potentially quite embarrassing to do. So a bit more planning. Will you follow the plan? Of course you won't. But have you captured a few more risks up front and de-risked it for everyone, hopefully?
Andy, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. You've got, your career is crazy. Like anyone who's listening to this podcast, go and look at Andy's background. It's wild. Not only was he in the Antarctic, but he did amazing stuff for amazing businesses. And yeah, I'm just really excited to kind of follow your career over the next 6 to 12 months.
Nice one. Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll catch you on the next one.